Tonight, 2016 strikes again. We've torn up everything we thought we knew as a late entry. François Fillon rewrites politics in France. Who is this former Prime Minister and how would he fare against Marine Le Pen? Can his Anglophile views help us do better with Brexit? We ask one of France's most distinguished broadcasters and commentators, Christine Ocran. Can the independent inquiry into child abuse regain the faith of its victims, or is it beyond repair?
Well, we've got to a stage, now down the line where it's crumbled. There's no other word for it. It's crumbled.
Business or pleasure or politics? It's so hard to know these days. Donald Trump is welcoming figures from around the world, but is he starting to merge the interests of the country with his own? We'll talk to George W. Bush's ethics advisor.
Why do you want to join the CIA?
I'd like to help my country make a difference in the world.
And why was actor Joseph Gordon-Levitt warned off playing the whistleblower Edward Snowden?
They said just kind of what you're saying. There's a controversial figure. He's polarizing in the United States. You have to think about the commercial viability of your career. And I don't think those people are wrong.
Hello, good evening. The man they used to call the bling-bling president is bowing out of French politics with barely a whimper. Nicolas Sarkozy, former French president, came a distant third in a race he was expected to win. But this is 2016, don't forget, the year where we take any political script and rip it up. So it is François Fillon, a man who likes driving racing cars, who's become the firm favourite to lead the centre-right into the spring election for an expected showdown with the National Front's Marine Le Pen. Monsieur Fillon, an economic liberal and social conservative, is an admirer of Thatcherism. He said he'll cut public sector jobs and rein in government spending, but his success last night may owe as much to tactical voting and a loathing of Sarkozy as anything he has done yet. Is it too early to ask what Fillon would mean for France and indeed for the UK as we head towards Brexit? Here's our diplomatic editor, Mark Urban.
François Fillon had his revenge, and it must have been sweet indeed. The man in the driving seat of Gaullist politics now is an amateur motor racer and was Nicolas Sarkozy's Prime Minister. Fillon fell victim to snide briefings by his boss, and last night he knocked Sarkozy out of the primary race for leadership of the centre-right. And for good measure, he pulled ahead of the other surviving candidate, Alain Juppé, by 12 points.
I think that the people who voted for François Fillon during the primary yesterday did it specially to kick out Nicolas Sarkozy, which is done. So now that we kick out Nicolas Sarkozy from the race, I think that the people will check more carefully the program.
The winner will face off against Marine Le Pen. And after Donald Trump's victory, she seems to be the one to beat. Le Pen is decidedly more Eurosceptic, but Fillon's politics appeal to many on the right. Religion is central to François Fillon's worldview. A Catholic, he's championed the cause of oppressed Christians in the Middle East, and it's central to his views on questions from abortion to gay rights, or the place of Islam in French society.
This means a policy will have to be put in place, a policy that I call administrative control, to steer Muslim communities progressively towards the acceptance of the rules that are those of our country.
The Fillon platform, with its emphasis on bringing French Muslims into line, touches delicate feelings given the recent terror attacks. But Fillon's supporters argue that's no accident.
The French are fed up by this kind of drifting away of cultural differences. And I think this is a major danger. Fillon is well aware of this danger, and this is why also he wants things to be very clear.
And it's through that prism, a global war against extreme Islam, that Fillon favours reconciliation with President Putin.
faut une coalition avec les Russes, bien sûr.
There has to be a coalition with the Russians, of course. And I'd find it a bit rich that, having taken a very counterproductive attitude that we had vis-à-vis Russia, that America and Russia now reconcile themselves over our heads. That's a sign our policy is bad, and it's time to change it.
Reform of the French economy forms the other main plank of Fillon's platform. There's talk of drastic slimming down of the public sector. Given how contentious reform of working hours and the retirement age has already proven in France, this won't be an easy sell.
It's very close to Thatcher program. It's a Christian Thatcher program. The people surfing on this wave will not bring any ballot from the centrist party. So we may have some division, and the centrist party will not support François Fillon because of this clearly Christian Thatcher program. It's way too right-wing.
De toutes les compétitions.
Fillon's driving passion has already got him a guest appearance on France's version of Top Gear. If it puts him into pole position to challenge Marine Le Pen, French voters might end up with a choice between right and far right.
Mark Urban there. Well, joining us now from Paris is the journalist Christine Ocran. Very nice of you to join us. And we heard a little bit there about his policies, perhaps his ideologies. But Christine, perhaps you can give us a flavour of the man himself, an Anglophile, a Welsh wife. How would you characterise him?
François Fillon is a calm guy. And he was Nicolas Sarkozy's prime minister for 5 years. But indeed, he has been a constant, if low-key figure in French conservative politics for ages. He's been an MP since he was 24. So he's very much the political establishment. But at the same time, I think his remarkable performance yesterday has to do with his consistency. And given the extreme weakness of the socialist president François Hollande on the one hand, and the fierce hatred that opposed Nicolas Sarkozy and Alain Juppé for the primary, the first round of the Conservative primary yesterday, I think François Fillon impressed voters with his very sort of calm, I stick to my program attitude. And it is true that his program, as indeed was pointed earlier on, is a mix of extremely conservative values as far as society is concerned, education. He wants to ban the law allowing same-sex people to adopt children, for instance, but also very liberal, especially by French standards, very liberal Thatcherian views about the economy. And I think that so far people haven't really looked very close at his program, and that will be actually the meat of the very fierce competition throughout this week, opposing Fillon and Alain Juppé.
And we're going to get that at the end of the next week. The words you've used, consistency, conservatism, don't point to the same trends that we're seeing globally. People looking for risk, for the outsider, for somebody who surprises them. Do you think France is bucking the trend, or does that just come next year?
No, I disagree with that view completely. Fillon is very much an insider. He's not a populist. What has happened in Europe, in the eastern part of Europe primarily, but also with Brexit, but also obviously in the US, is a wave of populism. Fillon is the opposite of that. Fillon is an insider. He's been an insider for years. And again, it's much more a reaction from the conservative, Catholic, very sort of serious-minded, liberal-minded people as far as the economy is concerned, who feel they're paying too much taxes, who feel that that business is being actually contrived.
Let me ask you,
it's very different.
The Brits, of course, have a dog in this race. How do you think his views towards Brexit will be influenced by his wife, by his love of Britain, as we understand it? Do you think he is a good person for us?
Well, first of all, his wife is Welsh, which, as I understand it, is something quite specific. But more seriously, I don't think, frankly, that Brexit is very much on François Fillon's mind for the time being. He's never been a wild Europhile. He actually voted against the Maastricht Treaty many years back. But he's very concerned about restoring a very strong Franco-German alliance.
Right.
And that is not necessarily, mean a very easy or flexible attitude towards Brexit.
And the million-dollar question before we go, Christine, can he beat Marine Le Pen, do you believe?
I believe he can. I think that he is actually very bad news for Marine Le Pen, precisely because he's so conservative on social issues. And he's so much concerned, in fact, with French identity, which has been Marine Le Pen's main argument so far. So I think as far as the French far right is concerned, François Fillon, if he becomes the Conservative candidate next Sunday, and indeed, if he wins the first round of our presidential elections at the end of next April, as Marine Le Pen may well be, so they will be facing one another, and I think he can win over Marine Le Pen.
Christine Ocron, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us. Now, as we came on air a few moments ago, Japan had been put on high alert following an earthquake off the coast of Fukushima. The preliminary magnitude of the quake was 7.3, but there is now a tsunami warning in place for waves of up to 10 feet. Fukushima, you'll remember, is home to the nuclear power plant that was destroyed by a tsunami 5 years ago after a major earthquake then. Well, we're going to cross live to Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, who's in Tokyo for us tonight to steer us through. What are you hearing, Rupert?
Well, the tsunami warnings, the tsunami alarms are still going off on the coast of Fukushima, about 200 miles to the north of Tokyo. There was an evacuation order called by the national broadcaster after the earthquake struck. Just before 6 o'clock this morning local time, calling for people to leave the coast immediately. Since then, we've seen a couple of waves come in, but they have been much smaller than expected. The height of the highest wave to strike the coast so far, just 1 metre or around 3 feet, not the 10 feet that was predicted. So it looks like this will not be anything on the scale of what happened back in 2011, of course. It is a strong earthquake. There is a tsunami warning in place, but it looks to be the people along that coast are not going to be struck by a large disaster.
Is your sense that they're taking the evacuation measures seriously, or are they staying put?
It's very hard to say from here exactly what ordinary people are doing. I think the response from the government and from the national broadcaster to call for people to evacuate immediately is, if you like, a response to what happened in 2011 when so many people ignored the evacuation orders, ignored the alarms, and were caught in their homes and were killed when that massive wave came in. And so now, whenever there's an earthquake of this scale offshore, particularly off the northeast coast of Japan, there tends to be a much quicker...
We've just lost Rupert there, but Rupert Wingfield-Hayes speaking to us from Tokyo there. Last week was a torrid one for the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. Newsnight revealed that yet another barrister was leaving after losing faith, and the largest survivors group involved in the inquiry said it had had enough. This week it faces more uncomfortable questions. The inquiry's former deputy counsel has written to MPs saying he has serious concerns about how it handled an alleged incident of sexual assault by one of its most senior staff. Tonight, another senior lawyer who has represented victims' families in 2 major inquiries tells us the child sexual abuse inquiry is crumbling. Jake Morris explains why.
Chilcot, Macpherson. Bloody Sunday. When major national inquiries do eventually report, they can deliver enduring change. But for the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, a triumphant end feels a long way away. Today at Westminster, there were more calls for the government to intervene.
They've lost 7 senior lawyers, 3 chairs and several survivors groups, and it is now impossible to see that this inquiry is still effectively operating. This may be the last chance that the Prime Minister and her Home Secretary have to rescue the inquiry that she set up from collapse.
It's absolutely essential that this inquiry is an independent inquiry. The terms of reference of this inquiry were shaped with the voices and the opinions of the victims, and it's very important that this independence is maintained.
It was high summer when the inquiry last decamped to the Royal Courts of Justice for a public hearing, but that was before all those departures. So, what has gone wrong with the inquiry? One theory goes that it has simply been asked to look at far too much. However, talk to some of those familiar with the inquiry's workings and they'll say that's not the case. Its goals are fairly well defined, and in principle it should be able to do its job. Instead, they point to some of the very well documented issues around some of the key personalities in the inquiry. Issues, they say, that have contributed to a sense of dysfunction.
Well, we've got to a stage, now down the line where it's crumbled. There's no other word for it. It's crumbled. What has gone seriously wrong here is a dismal failure to consult with the survivors' groups from the beginning about appointments and about the substantive materials that had to be assembled. Secondly, the actual appointments of the chair have been inappropriate, one after another. Just how many mistakes can you make? And of course, some of the groups are saying, have these mistakes been made on purpose?
The inquiry's current chair suggests there may be a different kind of agenda at play. Professor Alexis Jay has spoken of forces that don't want dark institutional failings brought into the light.
Victim survivors have to feel that they are coming to a safe place, and thus far the inquiry is being painted by these outside influences, sometimes aided and abetted by the media, as being an unsafe place. Now, I'm in there every week and I don't recognise it as an unsafe place. I see a lot of good people doing a lot of hard work, but there have been individuals that have come and gone, and clearly it wasn't the place for them to be.
The inquiry will receive more attention later this week. The Home Affairs Select Committee has written to a number of the inquiry's former lawyers asking for information. Their responses are due to be published. However, Newsnight understands that the inquiry has told those lawyers not to cooperate in any meaningful way with the committee. Those who accuse the inquiry of a lack of transparency are unlikely to be impressed. However, it is understood that one of those lawyers has sent a substantive reply regardless. Newsnight has previously revealed how the inquiry scrapped an investigation into Ben Emerson, its most senior lawyer, despite being told of an accusation alleging sexual assault by him in a lift at the inquiry offices, an accusation Mr. Emerson strongly denies. To date, the inquiry has brushed off criticism of how it handled that claim by simply saying they have never received an actual complaint. But it is understood this is a subject that the man who was the inquiry's second most senior barrister addresses in his letter to MPs. As well as his role with the inquiry, Hugh Davis QC is an expert on the subject of how institutions should act when they receive information of potential wrongdoing but receive no official complaint. It is understood Mr. Davies is highly critical of the inquiry's handling of the disclosure. For some, the inquiry has to have the survivors on board to succeed.
We get our assurances that it's going to be all right on the night. Well, I'm afraid I don't accept that. I'd want to get in and see exactly how bad it is. It looks extremely bad from the outside, and I can't see how ploughing on without the main actor. This is Hamlet without Hamlet.
The inquiry's defenders say it is doing good work. They point to the Truth Project, where many survivors of abuse have been recording their story. Let the inquiry get on with its job, the defenders say, but for others, there remain unanswered questions.
Jake Morris there. The opulent, gilded lobby of Trump Towers has seen a succession of besuited visitors over the last few days. Cabinet hopefuls, foreign leaders, associates. So seamlessly have they processed towards the president-elect. It hasn't been entirely clear who's there for business and who for politics. Donald Trump, we understand now, likes to do things differently. He chooses Twitter over press conferences. He chooses family counsel over special advisors, his own hotels over buildings of state. For everyone else, the business of presiding over America would be a call to put all other interests aside. For Trump, it's not so clear. Is the opacity, the blurring of lines just initial confusion with an office maybe he himself never expected to win? Or is it all part of the game plan? I'm joined now by Richard Painter, the White House lawyer who advised President George W. Bush on ethics in government. Richard Painter, very nice to speak to you this evening. As an ethics lawyer, what do you see at the moment that you don't like?
Well, the first thing I ought to say is that the corruption potential in the Trump administration is a serious problem and something that we are going to have to sort out in the United States. But our friends across the Atlantic and England and Europe and around the world ought to take comfort in the fact that Donald Trump's personal and business life has absolutely nothing to do with what he said during the campaign. His personal life has nothing to do with the claptrap of the social conservatives, religious conservatives he pandered to. He had friends in the Islamic community, particularly rich Muslims, to whom he leased and sold apartments and did business deals over many years. And like most American businessmen, he has made enormous amounts of money off of global commerce. So the notion that the United States is somehow going to retreat from global commerce under President Trump is really sort of a joke. And so we will have to sort out the corruption problems, and there are many of them. But I do not see this presidency going in the direction that he talked about simply in order to pander to white working class voters with a protectionist agenda.
So you sound as if you're actually reassured by the breadth and scale of his business interests, if anything, but you keep on returning to this word corruption, and that's quite a fierce charge, allegation. So what do you worry about here?
Well, there is the potential for corruption here when you have a president who has enormous business holdings all over the world and is supposed to be conducting the affairs of the United States government and supervising people throughout the executive branch who are conducting the business of the United States government. We have a whole range of problems that could come up. People will be peppering his businesses with lawsuits. The plaintiffs' lawyers in the United States are more than happy to go after President Trump. As you know, they can sue at the drop of a hat. They don't have to pay the losers' fees if they sue and lose, as they would in many other parts of the world. So we're going to see lots of that. And we saw how litigation against the president worked out under President Clinton. And I think that this is going to be a very bad situation if President Trump does not dispose of these assets around the world. And another problem is the potential for foreign government money to get into the Trump business empire to his financial benefit. And that would be prohibited by the emoluments clause of the United States Constitution. We have that provision because of the practice in the 18th century of the Crown in England, Great Britain, of giving emoluments to members of Parliament. And we did not want that going on.
Explain to us then, who steps in? I mean, you're an ethics lawyer. As I said at the beginning, Donald Trump has done everything differently. He's got Congress entirely on his side in terms of a Republican base. So who would actually step in and tell him that he is doing wrong?
Well, I'm not sure Congress is going to be on his side on this. Each member of Congress is in it for themselves in their own district, if that. And I don't think the Republican members of Congress are going to put up with a situation where the president appears to be benefiting financially from his public office. In particular, I get back to this concern about money coming in from foreign governments, because that is specifically prohibited under our Constitution. So he is going to, at a minimum, have to make absolutely sure that dealings with the Bank of China, with sovereign wealth funds, these diplomats who are staying in the Trump hotels, all of that is going to have to be cleansed of any impression of a gift.
Okay. Richard Painter, thank you very much. We should say we don't know what's going on at the moment. Of course, there have been denials of any impropriety in his business dealings and his mergings so far. Richard Painter, thank you very much. What does the Prime Minister have to do to help business? Today, she told the CBI she was going to help them by offering support to entrepreneurs and innovative companies. But when you speak to businesses themselves, they tell you things very differently. One of the bosses of the biggest tech companies in this country has told Newsnight that the government needs to bring in a radical reform of the tax system to create something that suits the digital age. The man in question is called Stephen Kelly, boss of the software giant Sage, and he's been talking to Adam Parsons. This plan, then, for radical tax reform, what is it, Adam?
Yeah, Stephen Kelly is a significant voice in British business because, A, he runs Sage, which is the largest tech company in the UK. Also, he was, at one time, the chief operating officer for the government, so he knows how the tax system works. And I've been talking to him about exactly the challenges facing Britain at the moment. Lots of thoughts, but they synthesise them into two things. One is his complaints about the tax system, and that is also because of the impact of the digital economy, about companies like Amazon, like Google, like Facebook, and where do they pay their tax. And he thinks these two things blend into one around business rates. That's something that we've had for centuries, brought in during the reign of the first Queen Elizabeth. And he says that is now an arcane link between property and tax because so much money is generated digitally now, not least by, as we say, Amazon, Google, these companies who don't pay historically vast amounts of tax but generate massive amounts of revenue. And what Mr. Kelly has told Newsnight is that he thinks there should be an overview of the tax system and a complete rethinking of it, looking at money that's earned online, and also, crucially, he's proposing the complete abolition of business rates.
And actually, I think it's kind of down to the government to step up and have a radical reform of the tax system to make it fair. So that I think, again, if you asked any executive, they want to be fair and they want to pay tax in the appropriate jurisdiction. But it's down to the governments to make sure the simplicity of the tax system really represents the way where physical presence and things like property have very little meaning in 2016. It may have meant something 400 years ago when there was no internet, but the internet's changed everything. And you can see through the prevalence of online shopping, the whole kind of focus and the shift towards the digital economy, that effectively a tax system created, well, in the essence, genesis of 400 years ago, makes no sense today.
Is he worried about taking on the big giants?
He is, although he runs a very big company himself. But also, remember, he's worked in the States, he's worked here. He knows that all you need is one clever idea, one Airbnb, one Uber, and you can generate a huge company. So I asked him, having worked on both sides of the Atlantic, what advice would he give to British tech companies?
There is a difference in terms of not just the philosophy of technology and how you kind of embrace it, but also the culture and the attitudes we have. I'd probably say, looking at the difference in the UK, we're more anxious and there's a bit of a fear of failure. In the US, we really encourage the culture where we'd actually fail fast and learn and grow. So I think if there's a lesson to be learnt from Silicon Valley, then it's probably we should abandon that fear of failure.
Stephen Kelly, the boss of Sage, speaking earlier to Adam Parsons there. The denials have been categorical and frequent. Tony Blair, Labour's most electorally successful leader ever, will not be returning to frontline politics and will not be seeking a Brexit-related role. So that, it seems, is that. Except that it probably isn't. Those in his inner circle say they wouldn't be surprised to see the former PM reappear, and indeed the frequency with which he reminds us how vacant the centre ground is does little to dispel the notion he's measuring up the metaphorical curtains for it. He wants, his office tells us, to remain part of the debate. He's also reported to be looking for a new base in London now. So would Tony Blair be warmly welcomed into the British political fray, or is he seen as a busted, still toxic flush? Brexiteers who believe the latter are getting quite excited at the prospect he might come back. Joining me now, then, Caroline Lucas, joint leader of the Greens, and John McTernan, former advisor to Blair. Very nice to have you both here. John, is your sense that there is something rippling below the waters, that he would quite like to come back despite the denials?
Oh, look, people are getting very excited, and correctly excited, because he's the biggest political figure of our era. and people can't stop talking about him because everybody wants him back in some way, shape or form. He's not gone away. He's been in politics. He's been talking about politics, commenting on politics. He had a great essay in the New European about the challenges of Brexit and what the government should be doing.
When you say everyone wants him back in some shape or form, what you mean is his enemies want him back, not on their side, right?
Look, he bestrides British politics still. It's nearly a decade since he stopped being Prime Minister, stopped being an MP, and we're on television now talking about him coming back. Of course he excites people, clearly does.
Politician, Caroline Lucas, for Labour, he was the last time Labour won anything.
He was the last time Labour won anything, but the idea that that qualifies him now to come back after everything that's happened with the Iraq War, with all of the dodgy dealings with dictators, and somehow to take some kind of moral high ground in our political debate now, I think beggars belief. I mean, I think John just needs to get out more. People are not begging for him to come back. And I think the last few months, if they've told us anything, with Brexit, with Trump, is that the political establishment is not held in a great deal of respect right now. And Tony Blair, to the extent that he is associated with that, the idea that he would be a good spokesperson for the Remain campaign or for any other key issues right now, I think is just ludicrous.
You might have this perfect package. I mean, a lightning rod for everyone who hates New Labour, everyone who hates Remain, everyone who hated the Iraq War. All your enemies could just target on this one thing.
Nearly half the country voted to stay in the European Union. And there are millions of people thinking about the vote now. Car workers didn't vote for tariffs.
And you did, Caroline. Wouldn't you like to have a strong voice like that?
It's Tim Farron or Tony Blair.
I would love to have a voice, but I would not want it to be Tony Blair, because what John doesn't recognise is that the message that Tony Blair gives might not be the problem, but the messenger is. He is fundamentally contaminated. And it is quite extraordinary, really, that people like yourself just don't see that. You know, get out there in the real world. People are not talking about Tony Blair in anything other than incredibly regretful terms, because they realise that this is just such a lost opportunity. He could have been a wonderful advocate, but he is fatally compromised and fatally contaminated.
We have a Prime Minister who's not up to the job. We've got a leader of the opposition whose ambition is to make the Labour Party an ultra-left sect. And we've got Tim Farron representing the centre ground. The place is begging for a figure of the size and quality, vision and oratory of Tony Blair.
Someone who is known for lying? Someone who's taken the country to an illegal and immoral war on a false prospectus? Is that what the situation is crying out for? Absolutely not.
Does that tell you how...
Tells me what the Greens think, and it's just absolute abuse. It's ridiculous abuse, and what I expect from Caroline, but ridiculous nonsense.
Does that tell you how empty the ground is then? If somebody who, you know, from Caroline Lucas's perspective... Yeah, but from the perspective of a strong voice for Brexit, you would presumably welcome it, but couldn't even tolerate the thought of it for Remain.
Caroline Lucas represents a strand of politics way to the left of the Labour Party, even to the left, and more destructive than John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn. Tony Blair has merely said, and he got great excitement by doing this, by saying the vast bulk of British people are unrepresented in modern politics. At the moment, there's no voice. The opposition is terrible.
I think there is some truth in that, but the idea, I come back to the idea that Tony Blair is the person to fill that space, I think is absolutely wrong. And I think you've got the Greens, you've got the Lib Dems, you've got the Nationalists, you've got some in Labour at least, who are doing their very best to fill that space.
Senses, post-Chilcot, presumably, he thought, you know, if you like, the boil would be lanced. It was time to carry on. He's done his 2-hour press conference, mea culpa, he's got to move forward now. Are you saying that there is no space in which he can now move forward?
I think I am saying that, and I genuinely say that with regret, because he is enormously persuasive, he is charismatic, he has huge, you know, communication skills. He in many ways is a brilliant communicator.
And that's not a lone voice,
is it? Contaminated.
That is a voice that it will echo throughout TV sets at home and throughout this country.
Labour voters, when polled, say they'd rather have Tony Blair as the leader of the Labour Party than Jeremy Corbyn.
But how is
it's not surprising, because Tony Blair was not just a victor. Tony Blair today articulates a vision of where Britain should go that's far more powerful and profound than any leading politician of any of the major political parties at the moment. And that's the problem. If there was not a vacuum at the heart of British politics, we wouldn't be so interested, excited, obsessed with Tony Blair. Caroline just talks and talks and talks about him.
I haven't talked about him for ages until I was asked to come. Believe me, I don't.
Talk on and on and on about Tony. He fascinates them.
But what you are both saying is, from a Remainers perspective, the job is not being done properly for you, right?
Not by anybody in the House of Commons. No one in the House of Commons.
No, I disagree with you about that. I think it is a great shame that Labour is not united on this, and I think Labour should be making a much stronger case to be holding the government to account when it comes to a meaningful vote, for example, on Article 50. When it comes to, I think we should have a vote on the terms.
And Tony Blair is the only person who can do this.
But that is where I disagree with him.
Labour voters, Remain voters, are being betrayed by Jeremy Corbyn. We have a Brexit vote that was the consequence of Jeremy Corbyn's betrayal of the Labour Party's commitment to the European Union. In that space, there's a vacuum for thinking inside the Labour Party, a vacuum inside the House of Commons.
The irony is that the Brexit vote was fuelled in part by the fact that people don't trust politicians anymore. Why don't they trust politicians anymore? Not least because of the way in which Tony Blair took us to war. That is the bottom line, and I'm sorry for it, but it's true.
Thank you both. Thank you very much for coming in. Now, to some, Edward Snowden's a hero, a whistleblower who exposed the extraordinary extent of the United States surveillance of its own and other people's. To others, notably the US government, the former spook is a traitor who must stand trial if he ever emerges from Russia, where he says he's been grounded since his passport was revoked. A feature film based on Snowden's story is coming to a cinema near you through the good offices of controversial director Oliver Stone. Playing the lead is actor Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who's made his own study of the relationship between technology and democracy. He's been talking to our culture correspondent, Stephen Smith.
There's something going on inside the government that's really wrong, and I can't ignore it. I just want to get this data to the world.
It is from kind of his point of view and trying to get inside of his head.
I feel like I'm made to do this, and if I don't do it, then I don't know anybody else that can.
What I've found, and when you have conversations with people about Edward Snowden, it matters less about all the technology, all the policy. You can tell them all the facts about why the mass surveillance is unconstitutional. What they want to know about is, yeah, but him. What about him? What about him as a human being? Can I trust him?
The average test time is 5 hours. If you take more than 8, you will fail.
The Snowden of Oliver Stone's film is a patriot and a tech nerd. Injured out of the army, he becomes a rookie spook, designing a covert communications network against the clock.
Mr. O'Brien? I'm done, sir.
You don't have to tell me when you've completed a stage.
No, I finished the whole thing.
It's been 40 minutes.
38.
What?
38 minutes.
I believe you went to see him in Moscow. And
I did, yeah.
How did you find him? What was that like?
It was really something, you know. I mean, I've been really fortunate in my life that I've gotten to meet a lot of people who I admire a lot. But Edward Snowden's in kind of a whole other category, you know. This is a guy that risked his life to stand up for what he believes in.
I think he appears as himself, doesn't he, at the end of the film?
Spoiler.
Is that right?
Spoiler.
Sorry. Actually, he does a good job as Snowden. But he talks about what he gave up.
He's living in Moscow now, and a lot of his critics like to, you know, kind of use that against him and say, oh, well, then he must be working for the Russians. The truth is, what happened was he went to Hong Kong to hand the information that he took over to a select set of journalists.
The government knows that we have these documents now. The CIA could barge through this door any minute and you want more time. Act like a journalist and stop stringing us along.
But of course, a lot of people in your country would say he's a traitor and would like to see him stand trial.
Well, anytime someone stands up to a powerful authority throughout history, that powerful authority tries to discredit them. It's a question of government being accountable to the people. You know, whether or not mass surveillance is right or wrong, that's a discussion we can have, and I think there are valid points on both sides.
With roles in blockbusters like Inception and a big Batman film behind him, Gordon-Levitt's on a blue streak. Did his agent warn him a controversial Oliver Stone movie might not be a smart career move?
drop you without gravity.
There were definitely people that said that to me. You know, they said just kind of what you're saying. There's a controversial figure. He's polarizing in the United States. You have to think about the commercial viability of your career. And I don't think those people are wrong. But I don't know, I couldn't make my decisions based on that kind of thinking.
A lot of my friends that I speak to are very concerned about the fact that we give away so much information about ourselves very freely, but we don't think about what the consequences of that might be and how much power we're giving to someone else.
Actor Emma Watson and others debate oversharing and the relationship between technology and democracy in online productions made by Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
I tend to be really optimistic about technology. I tend to think, you know, the internet, it provides us so much information, so much connection from person to person. That's a great thing. I never really stopped for a moment to think about any of the potential pitfalls that this new technology might have.
The Snowden film's a cautionary tale about those pitfalls.
Most Americans don't want freedom. They want security. It's a simple bargain. Good girl, good girl. If you want to play with all the new toys...
And incidentally supplies the very real pleasure of Rhys Ifans, yes, that's who it is, chewing the scenery as a Machiavelli of American spycraft.
Where's the modern battlefield, soldier?
Everywhere.
Steve Smith there. Now, before we go, here's something to savour. The Grammy-winning mezzo-soprano Joyce DiDonato is in the UK this week for a performance of her new collection, In War and Peace, Harmony Through Music. The album's all about the healing power of music in an epoch of war and chaos. And we're lucky enough to have her here tonight, accompanied by the ensemble Il Pomodoro, to perform Handel's Lascia ch'io pianga. Good night.